Bob Pickard has 20 years of experience as an international public relations executive. He spent 4 years heading a public relations office in Tokyo and has also served as a Canadian political aide in his early career.
I think Japan is a world leader in all these different areas, electronics, automobiles, but in terms of communications modernity, I think Japan is a developing nation still. And the way that they've handled this crisis shows it. Now, part of the fact of the matter here is that if you have a tsunami, an earthquake, a nuclear meltdown going on, even the best crisis communications is going to have a tough time getting on top of that. It's so complex, things are out of control. I mean, it's easy to be critical of the Prime Minister of Japan, but what if he actually doesn't know what's going on? What if nobody knows what's going on? There's just so much. I think in a crisis situation like this, there's this paradox of transparency. It seems counterintuitive to come out and fearlessly put onto the record all of the things that have gone wrong or which could go wrong. Yet, I think if the government were to do that and talk in a far more explicit way about what's going on, I think people would be more reassured and be more confident about their role in surviving this. Because right now what they're doing is they're downplaying things, they're minimizing, they're obfuscating, and they're being too opaque. And that makes people worry about what is the real story here. But they're basically saying, don't worry, folks, there's nothing to worry about here. And yet, at the same time as they're saying that everything is safe, people on television will see exploding nuclear reactors. So I think the difference between the government's line and the images that people see with their own eyes, that's the problem here. Well, first of all, when the Prime Minister comes out and communicates that there's been an explosion at one of the nuclear reactors 5 hours after it happens, I mean, that's just not fast enough to inspire the confidence of the people. So that kind of a time lag allows an information vacuum to occur where myths and falsehoods and rumors fill this void. I think within the first 60 minutes of a major crisis incident, those in authority must come out and talk about what has happened, state the facts of the matter. Not why it happened or what could go wrong in the future, but just the facts, ma'am. Here's what's happened. Our advice also would have been to centralize the chain of communications command. At the beginning, the government seemed to lean on TEPCO, the power utility, too much. And then later on, the government now seems to be trying to establish control of the messaging. But if you have different voices in a crisis, then people aren't sure which one of those voices to believe. So I think we would have established that one-voice communications right from the start.
この度の東北地方太平洋沖地震は
I think the emperor's speech is something that was done right. I think the national symbol embodied in the emperor really did help people reassure themselves that things would be all right in the end. And the emperor said that he was extremely worried, and he was speaking about his true fears. And I think people could relate to that. There's no doubt, if you read the newspaper reports, that foreign governments are unhappy with the level of information they have been receiving from the government of Japan. Now, let's be sympathetic, though. The government of Japan has a lot going on right now, and there's only so much bandwidth that they have. And keep in mind, too, everything is happening in a crisis situation rather rapidly on the ground in Japanese. We have to share information with foreign governments. It would often have to be translated into another language. So that does affect the amount of time. While they need to establish a modern social media regime, they need a campaign where they use Twitter and other branded social media channels like YouTube more effectively. I mean, the Japanese Prime Minister's office only established a Twitter account after this crisis began. So I think that shows you how far we have to go. The way that the government can communicate the reality of a modern, confident, successful Japan that's open for business and welcoming of tourists is to put the life of this country on Facebook and Twitter and all of these different places like YouTube, where people can see and experience and participate and co-create through their involvement personally with the Japanese brand. I think he should be accessible. And where is he? Is he hunkered down in some government emergency control facility in Tokyo? Or is he there with the people, shivering in the cold, frightful for what's going to happen with the radiation, their lives devastated? He should be right there with them during a national disaster. That's what other leaders have done to great effect in moments of crisis. Well, I look at Rudolph Giuliani, who at the time, people forget this, he was a very unpopular mayor of New York City in 2001. And there he was on the front lines of this crisis. He was with the people, he took command of the situation as the situation was unfolding. He was part of the communications effort right from the beginning, unafraid of the consequence of being there in a very dangerous situation. I think that speaks volumes for what a real leader does when tested under the fire of a crisis. I think the Chinese government, after the Sichuan earthquake, with the political leaders being right there on the scene, showing their concern and their compassion, evidenced a tremendous grasp of crisis communications that has so far eluded the Japanese government. I look, though, if you want to look at the worst case scenario, I look at President Zardari of Pakistan, who was on a European junket visiting London at the time when people were dying in that flood situation last year. That was certainly the opposite of what would be best practice advice. I don't think it's too late. You know, he has a wonderful asset, and that's the national character of the people of Japan. If you look at their stoicism, the way that the average people are dealing with the situation, you know, queuing up at train stations, no mob disorder, no looting. He just needs to ditch his fears and forget about what some of his advisors are saying and just speak with one voice, take command of the situation, and rapidly get ahead of this thing. You know what? With this revolving door of prime ministers in Japan, they're fed up with politics. And they want a new leader, a strong leader, an intelligent leader who's articulate and takes charge of the situation.